Hi, I'm Maggie, and in this video I will be discussing the processing programming language for my CS245 final project. Processing is an open source programming language and integrated development environment built for electronic arts and visual design communities with the purpose of teaching programming basics in a visual context. The language builds on Java, and like Java, is object-oriented. The language uses a simplified syntax and graphics programming model. The code is translated to Java before it's compiled. The project was initiated in 2001 by Benjamin Fry, an expert in data visualization and principal of Fathom, a design and software consultancy in Boston, and Casey Rees, an artist and professor at UCLA. The Pre-Ars Electronica is one of the most important yearly prizes in the field of interactive art, computer animation, digital culture, and music. The project won a Golden Nika under Net Vision category from the Pre-Ars Electronica in 2005. Processing is a great alternative to expensive software and daunting programming languages. It's free to download the development environment, and you can even write just one line of code to your project and get a visual result right away. Here's the processing.org website. It has most everything you need to know about processing language. It has references, libraries, tools, tutorials, and examples. Here you can find descriptions for how to use methods. You can also find out about primitive data types, data structures, and other methods to use files, use text, images, and math. We'll start out simple and look at ellipse. This is a method that takes in 4 parameters. The first is the x-coordinate, the second is the y-coordinate, the third is the width, and the fourth is the height. I will demonstrate the processing development environment. Here you can see the toolbar tabs, which allows you to run, stop, save, open, and export files. Code is written in the text editor. Here's the message area for one-line messages, and the console is used for more technical details. I will start with just one line of code in the text editor. I'll draw an ellipse, the x-coordinate at 50, y-coordinate at 30, width of 40, and the height of 60. Click this to run. And here in the display window, an ellipse is drawn. If you want an animation rather than a static drawing, you will need to use the methods setup and draw. The code in the setup method execute once when the program begins. You can set the size of the display window with the size method. I'll set it to 500 by 500 pixels. I can use the method stroke to determine the line color. When you give it 3 parameters, it will use RGB values. So if I would want red, I can set it to 200 and 0 for the other values. Fill will determine what the shape is filled by. So you can make that green. Next, you need a draw function. Code written in the draw method is executed in order until the program is stopped. Background sets the background color. If you just use one argument, it would be this grayscale value rather than the RGB value. 0 for black and 255 for white. So I can make it a dark gray with 50. And now we can draw our ellipse. In processing, there are system variables such as mouse X and mouse Y. This allows the ellipse to be drawn where the mouse is. And I'll make it 40 wide and 60 high again. To comment out code, you can just put 2 slashes. Here it is. I will demonstrate how to use variables and how processing is an object-oriented language. So first, I will use the keyword class and the name of my class, which I'll call ball. Everything will go within these curly braces. The main components of a class are its data, the constructor, and its methods. So I'll start with the data. I'll declare integers, its x position, the y position, the width, the height, the speed. Next, I'll create a constructor. Constructor is called when an object is created for the class. It initializes members of the class and has the same name as the class. So be called ball. Since I always want my ball to start in the middle left of the screen, I will not put them as parameters in my constructor and just set them in the constructor. So x will be set to 0, y is set to 250. The rest of them are determined when the object is created. Next, I will create methods for the class. So first, I want it to be drawn. I'm just taking the x, y, the width, and the height. Besides being drawn, I want the ball to move, so create move ball function. And to do that, I'll just increment x by the speed. I'm going to create another function to change its color. So recall earlier we used stroke and fill, so I want to put a random RGB value. So to do that, there's a function in processing called random that will take in 2 numbers. One is the minimum and one is the maximum. So I will take a number between 0 and 255 for each of the parameters. that's my simple class. I'll make this ball a global variable, so to do that, you first declare its type like any other variable, and I'll call it B, and use the new keyword to create a new ball. So now I'm using the constructor to create the ball. So it takes in the width, which I'll just make 40 again, and the height, which I'll just make 60 again. And I'll make it slow, so speed is 1. Now I need to call its methods in draw in order for it to be drawn, moved, and change color. So to do that, call the object name, use a period, and then call the functions. Alright, and I'll comment out this ellipse. And there it is. Started on the left middle. It's moving across and it's changing colors. Make the ball bigger and faster. If you want to create more than one object, you can use an array. Here's an example. It's a project from my first computer science class. Here I created 3 global variables. The first is the max number of objects that can be drawn on the screen. The next is the array of objects. And the third one is the index where to create the next object. Here's the class I created. It's called myObject and takes in the x, y position and the width and height. I also have methods called drawObject to draw the object and step to make the object move. In mouse pressed, whenever the mouse clicks, a new object is placed in the array. And then the index is incremented to place the next object. Using modulo max objects will allow only 10 objects to appear on the screen at once. In the draw method, it iterates through the array. If the object exists, you call step and draw object on it. So this is a Halloween-inspired project. So there's always a witch in the background, and when you click, scared faces will appear. And there can't be more than 10 objects at once. As you can see, the last one disappears. Now that you have an idea of basic syntax for processing, I'll introduce Processing.js. Now, what is Processing.js? It's a JavaScript port of processing, so it converts processing code to JavaScript and runs it. Processing.js can make processing sketches work using web standards without any Java plugins. This means you can run your processing code in a web browser. The project was started in 2008 by John Rissig, a software engineer best known as the creator and lead developer of jQuery JavaScript library, and picked up by students at Seneca College in Toronto. Now let's take a look to see how processing code is converted to JavaScript code. Now this section of code processes global methods and constants for the parser. The names array contains keywords of the processing language. Here are some familiar keywords, such as draw and ellipse. mouse X, and mouse Y. This section adds custom functions, properties, and libraries attached to processing. The function parse processing takes the code and creates an abstract syntax tree, which is a representation of the abstract syntactic structure of the source code written in a programming language. So it basically represents the structure of the program code. This large section of the code acts as a lexer, which chunks the characters of the code into parts. Split to atoms marks curly braces with A, parentheses with B, and brackets with C. It also marks the index number in the array. In this language, it's important to differentiate between them because each parenthesis, bracket, and curly brace serve a different purpose. Since leading and trailing spaces aren't needed in an abstract syntax tree, they are removed, and so are comments. Here, classes, methods, constructors, and functions are identified using regular expressions. For example, the classes start with a type, and then with class or interface. The transform methods create abstract syntax tree objects. There are many types of abstract syntax tree objects. It starts at the root, AST root, and it can be of type for statement, catch statement, prefix statement, method, class, interface, function, statement block, and label. Here's transform statements. This is where new AST objects are created. The AST object's toString function returns the JavaScript code for the statement. For example, in functions in JavaScript, they start with the keyword function. So the variable result will start with function. In processing, variables have their types declared. However, in JavaScript, they just have the keyword var, V-A-R, in front of it. So in the AST var object, toString method, it returns var plus the definition. The resulting JavaScript code is evaluated and run. Since processing code is converted to JavaScript, you won't need the develop environment I was using earlier to run your code. You can use web IDEs. Here is sketchpad.cc, and here's the early example I used. Another web ID is openprocessing.org. My code is below. You can also run your processing projects in Jupyter. First, you must install and import the processing kernel, then create a file and make a directory for it. Here are some other examples from my first computer science class. They all work exactly as they do in the development environment. Here's a simple version of 2048.